So welcome back to East Asia International Management, and we're close to the end of the term. We're talking about negotiations now. As we get into these negotiations, we've talked about how negotiation is a capacity of power to influence others, and there's 5 sources of power, and there's a variety of definitions of power you should be aware of. There's power through social networks and social capital. There's 8 types of influences or tactics, and soft ones generally leading to greater levels of commitment. And power is potential. The influence is actual, and politics is just a perception. So, for example, just starting with this idea of power, when you're negotiating, it depends on if somebody is powerful or not. You as students, generally young people, they were thinking that they don't have a lot of work experience. So can a young person become powerful? Let's say Justin Bieber or any of the BTS boys. Can they be powerful? How can somebody be powerful? Any ideas from the class?
Yes, I would say someone can be powerful if they have a lot of connection and can therefore influence a lot of people.
Lots of guangxi, right? The more popular they are, the more followers they are, the more powerful they are. The alternative, the old-fashioned definition, the different definition of power, is to somebody that is a specialist, an exclusive person, like a king. Or some people say in Korea, a professor is very high level, or a director or manager of a company. They have power to be able to influence people under them. So that power is either granted by certain rights, or the power is granted through popularity and having lots of guangxi connections, or that power is granted through specialization or your expertise. So if you have that folder with expert ideas in it and you're specializing in something, you are developing your power just through class. And again, remember, class is not that important. You are developing your power, the one of the 3 levels, your power through your expertise. Good. The variety we can talk about here. Moving on, overviewing the topic. We are going to define conflict, make sure it's interesting and clear to you guys. The idea of 5 approaches to conflict handling, and then strategies used by skilled negotiators. There's a variety of things we're going through. There's also the class video where we are teaching this for, I don't know, many decades before we've been teaching this. Hopefully you guys have been able to go through some of this stuff. First of all, the idea that conflict is not an objective, tangible phenomenon, rather it exists in the minds of people. So you can change details just depending on how you phrase other people to think of you. So how you form the picture of you in other people's minds. So if you are a specialist in something, their picture of you will be completely different than in East Asia, just a regular student. Regular students typically are thought of as young people without a lot of experience, period. So next, conflict is inherent in organizational life, and it is both potential benefits and costs. There's lots of research talking about it. It's common everyday life you're dealing with it. So we started talking about this Qantas Airlines. Last class, I was showing you that there's sometimes one powerful person over top of many other smaller people or regular workers. And we saw this example that showed the CEO of Qantas Airlines, one guy comparing or negotiating with sometimes thousands of workers. And that's why unions become very powerful, because if each worker is separate, they have very little power to negotiate with the CEO. But if all of the workers come together, they could have very strong power. Some people say more power than the CEO. However, this case the CEO was saying that the company has to reduce costs in order to stay competitive with the competitors. Other airlines are getting more business because their prices are lower, their costs are lower. So the CEO said, we have to reduce costs. We have to pay less, we have to cut costs. We can't give you special treatment. For a crazy example, we can't give you a limo ride to work or home every day. We have to stop that limo service. And the workers all got together and said, well, we've had this for 20 years. You can't take it away now. That's not fair. It's not legal. So they protest and they don't let the guy do it. And everything the guy was saying to start lowering costs to save the airline, the group of workers said, no, no, no. And so eventually what this guy did is he just closed the business. He closed temporarily all of Qantas Airlines until that group was interested in coming back. And when it was closed, you're able to start laying people off. So that's an extreme case. You should know there's other cases for it. You shouldn't just be thinking of one versus one. The CEO wanted to cut airline costs, and the workers wanted to not only keep their rights, keep their privileges, keep their rewards, but make them better. So they wanted one thing and he wanted one thing. There was no resolution. How can you get around that? You need to start looking at many different alternatives. So conflict is the process which parties perceive that interests are being opposed or negatively affected by another. The key thing here is interest, this big S, interest. There are many things that are always involved. You should be thinking of that. Try to remember that small guy, the bad guy, is only thinking of one thing. If you are in a negotiation where there's only one thing versus one thing, it's usually very hard. You should try to identify many different things that that other person has and many different things that you have. And yes, they may be most interested in negotiating one thing. But as soon as you say, but I also have this and this and this and this and many other things, then it starts to become apparent that you might not even need that main thing. And you can still come out with better results. So focus on that many things. That idea of the one pie, the fixed pie, is bad. Just a win-win versus one person is bad. Try to think of the bigger picture. Traditionally, we were talking about how long time ago, negotiation was very bad, and it grew throughout the ages. Back before the 1970s, they were saying that conflict or arguing or debating or negotiations is bad. It's basically just fighting. And eventually, 1970s to 1980s, people were able to start thinking that there was an area where it's bad, and then maybe the other extreme could also be bad. This party gets more versus this party gets more. That could be bad. But there is an area where you can have more advantages. It's good to debate. And I have actually asked you guys to try debating with me since day one. I would love for you to try to debate with me. And so based on today, I think I'm just going to give everybody maybe 5% out of 100 until you start negotiating and showing of value. So I asked you some questions this morning. Most of you failed these questions. I give you 5 out of 100. Maybe if you said 2 or 3 things, I'll give you 15 or 20, unless you start negotiating. So next, we identified that there's constructive conflict. There's a good debate. There's good negotiation. The more you identify many different options, the more you identify the other party can have many different offerings, the better. Especially when you identify those hard things, sometimes are not that important. And life, since the caveman time, has been working with the barter system, the trading system. I will trade with you one thing or 2 things or 3 things in exchange for your one thing. So keep thinking about that extensive agreement. There's lots of research related to it. Similar to telling the class, you should work with Guangxi, you should work with LinkedIn, you should work with sharing files with other people. Why should you share files with other people? Just number one, the idea of the wisdom of crowds. Crowdsourcing often gives you better results than just one genius working by themselves. That's number one. Another reason is the more you work with others, the better you develop your guangxi. So I promoted that you should work online with Google Files, with social media. That's one thing I was saying. Next, I was talking a lot about articles. And I did say, and I will repeat now, that you should develop a habit of finding an article that is something you love and start sharing that with other people. Develop your own version of that paper. Does anybody have an article they would like to share today in exchange for points? Go on.
I can share the Instagram thing that I was talking about previously. If that counts.
What I am taught, great, Instagram could be very good. I will admit, I am terrible with art. I know that art and photos has value to some people. What I, in my mind, was thinking is that you actually have research experts finding best ways to do things, and you share that, so you also are associated with doing the best things, being the best mind, being a specialist with something. Is your Instagram photo showing practices, making you a specialist?
Oh, it's not a photo. It's like a document. It is Word document. It has, I don't know, 11, maybe 15 pages, and it is talking about how to grow on Instagram and maybe like from what kind of angle to think about when we are trying to gain more followers, and in general, like about social media.
Okay, go ahead. Feel free to have it ready or not yet.
I do not have it in a Google, so I will just put it into a Google and then I can share it because I have it in like Microsoft Word.
If you can share it now, I mean, just show it to the class and explain it, great. If you wanted to share it permanently later, you can do that. But I was talking now just to show people what you're talking about. What I'm specifically trying to get is help you get into the habit of finding an article in your research and you start developing something related to that and then share that. So it's a research paper, reliable, respected research paper. You start just flashing that to the world, like the title, for example, and say that you are developing something similar. That simple summary of a research document of the world's best minds is a very good practice. So you should be doing that. If not today, any day we have class before the end of the semester.
Yeah, I can share it immediately.
Okay.
So should I, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
UNO, could you summarize what I just said about the idea of this? This is one specialization article that you could share, or this idea of the research, how you could share some things. Can you summarize that to the group after he finishes UNO? Just think about how you're going to summarize that. Go ahead, Thomas.
So it is pretty long, so I will probably, yeah, it has 15 pages, so I will not go through literally everything, but just to explain some basics. On Instagram, there is a few ways how to make money. One of them that you probably know is to be a social media like popular person. So like if you are a soccer player or someone and you have to drag the people somehow into your account so they are able to follow you, and then you are able to maybe sell them something. But the other way is a niche page. Niche page is a page that is that specifies into a certain niche. One of the best niches is, for example, about dogs, about cats. Those are really popular. About makeup, if you're a girl, or also about cars or fitness. And of course, like other pages or like other niches are starting to be popular right now, which can be about like human rights or Black Lives Matter. That is something that you were able to grow really fast on. So I think that the first thing that is really important to realize is that people are selfish. So you shouldn't like really share something that you are the only one that you are interested in, but you should share something that is for other people. It has to give them certain kind of value. It doesn't matter what it is. When I started my first account, I, for example, picked something that is funny. So I used the niche of cats, and I was posting there like funny videos and funny like memes. And that got me to 150,000 followers. But you can also, if you are really good at something, which can be, for example, I don't know, soccer, or if you play computer games, it doesn't really matter if you know how to cook, you can share your knowledge with them, and that is why the person will follow you, because right now they have a reason to follow you and they can learn something from you. How the Instagram growing actually works is that every single social media, it has some kind of, I don't know the word right now, but basically when you are posting a photo, algorithm is the word that I was looking for. So for example, on Instagram, if I post a photo and I have 100 followers, let's say that 10%, those numbers that I'm saying right now are numbers they are exact, but those are just examples. So let's say that the Instagram will show it to 10% of my followers, meaning 10 people. And once it shows to them, it looks at what reaction they had. It doesn't really matter if the reactions were positive or negative. Instagram is looking for any kind of reactions. So if it has comments, if someone shared it with someone else, if there are likes, maybe that the link was showed to someone, or that you, for example, on TikTok, you can also download the video. So that is another important thing. Another thing is that you can spend certain amount of time on the post. So if the video has 1 minute and you watch the video for the full length of the video, it is much better for the video, and it will like Instagram will show it to more of your followers, and then also to people that actually do not know your account. Here are just like, I listed some of the people that you can learn from. And also I, for example, started with a guy that is on YouTube, and he is called Biaheza. He has a lot of really good content about, in general, making money. He started with niche pages, and right now I think that he is doing drop shipping, which is another form of business when you buy something from China and you sell it to a customer, for example, in the US, and you don't have to even touch the product at all. Every account isn't the same that is there, just because every account is different. So what works for me doesn't have to work for you. So it is always important to actually like think about it and not just copy others. A really important question is by a lot of people is when I will get to 10,000, 100,000 or a million followers. It takes time. It definitely takes a lot of time. The more you do it, the better you will become at it. But do not expect it that it will happen in 1 or 2 days. My first account to get to 100,000 followers got like, I think that it took me like 3 years. The second one was, I think, 4, 5, maybe 6 months. I don't really remember because I wasn't even checking it. Which is another good tip, is do not check the followers account, just post things every single day, be consistent with it, and actually listen to the people that are following you, what they want to see. Here is how the Instagram works. I was explaining it before. It will show to one person, then to 3 others based on your reaction, and it just continues. New features, Instagram once in a while gives a new feature, which was, for example, the Instagram stories, or right now Instagram Reels, which is basically TikTok. And it is important because at the start, no one knows about it, so no one is using it. However, after a while, like Instagram wants to get more people into the, let's say, Instagram Reels, because that is how they make money. So they will try to promote you if you are actually posting on there. So if you will be one of the few first people that get into it, you will get like a lot of exposure and a lot of followers, likes, and everything around it, which is what helped my second account. So that is something that you should always look into. Then the first thing when you are creating your account is choose your niche. I was already talking about it. It can be about fitness, it can be about cooking, baking, it doesn't really matter. It should be something that you're interested in and that you will not get bored with easily. Then you should choose your username for your account. There is a difference between the name and username. Username, as you can see, is the main thing. And you shouldn't, like, you should use something that is related to your niche. For me, in the second account, it was puppy, so I just use pups. And because I already had fluffy kittens before.
Thomas, do you have,
Yeah.
is this a long presentation? It's very valuable, but it might not.
Yeah, it is really long. As I said, it is 15 pages, so I don't think that I can go through everything.
Great.
But
You've started a very attractive introduction to it. If you wanted to share a link to it with the class, that would be very valuable. Did you want to give maybe a 30-second wrap up? What is the main most important points of this? And then we'll move back on to the class negotiation.
Yeah, so basically I think that just the main points are that you should be consistent, meaning that you should post every single day. You should listen to the people that are following you. You should also aim for emotions, which is really important, because if a video makes you cry, you are more likely to stay on it for a longer time. And I would say that the last thing is just to always have a story up, because you will get the circle around your icon, and just never stop learning about the thing, to be always like on time, I guess. Just like know everything at the time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. We should give some bonus points for that, so you won't completely fail for sharing some of your specialization. Great, thanks. Getting back to negotiating details, any questions about that before I start asking you guys what are the core aspects of negotiation that you guys are aware of so far? Going once? Twice? Anybody wants to try to share what are the core aspects, or the idea of the PPTs? I've shared not just one PPT for today, but I've also shared links to several other folders with lots of information about international negotiations. And so I want to present the overall ideas of negotiation today, and then just show you some of these other articles. Have any of you seen those other articles related to negotiation? No? Okay, let's get on to talking about them together. So Thomas is just, is somebody trying to talk? No? Thomas shared one example of how he has specialization abilities. He's showing he's good, and because of that, he should be able to have a stronger negotiation ability when he's dealing with that type of issue. This is another similar type of example of expertise or specialization, talking about how it's good to debate, it's good to argue, it's good to start showing that you disagree with other people if you have a good cause that may provide better benefits. And this is actually talking about how back in the 1950s, I believe, a lady physician, she found out that a lot of kids were actually having a lot of serious problems just because the mother was getting x-rayed back at the time when nobody thought x-rays had any problems at all. And so her presentation of her results. She wrote a paper, she researched it very well, but because she was a lady and she was saying something that most of the world thought was wrong, it wasn't accepted for at least 20, 25 years. So make sure you understand, just having an Einstein specialization, having some great Nobel Prize worthy project, it is not going to really help you unless you use that art of war in Guangxi. You need to have connections with many others to get a stable foundation of people to support your ideas. So that's what this is talking about. Overall, I want to talk about what is the conflict process. So we've talked a little bit about this. I just want to bring to your attention the idea that you have to be aware negotiation is a process. Negotiation is just going through your mind. So how you paint that picture of negotiation in every related person's mind is very important. If you allow other people to think you are just a young, inexperienced student, you may not have very much negotiation power. You may not even be able to interview people or get people to respond to your LinkedIn if you're just showing you're a young student. Certainly in areas where they think young students don't have much experience. Again, the process. So how do you resolve that? How do you increase your ability to do better? You need to paint the picture of you being a specialist. So how do you do that? There's a variety of things you take a look at. The idea of your image, the idea of you're not just focused on a task, you're not just focused on an exchange of one thing for another, you're focused on, for example, being connected with many others. I'm not saying that you are the BTS connected with millions of people. I'm saying in that negotiation, you start identifying that it's not just one thing versus another. It's talking about how you are representing many possible people or many possible items, many possible parts of the negotiation to that other people. If that other person sees there's many parts of it and you are just a representative, like a union head, like we talked about with Qantas, you get much better negotiation response. Next, related to that, in some parts of the world, I want to show that that relationship versus task focus is huge. I'm from Canada, United States. That area is focused on one individual detail. They're individualistic focus. It's not an individual person, it's just one part. It's individual person and individual detail. So when we are negotiating, we usually look at that one individual detail, which right now, a lot of people may say North America is super, super powerful. But let's look at the reality. Throughout this slide, we have a little bit of time left. I want to show you that North American idea of we are looking at one thing, that's how negotiation should be. Like that Harvard project, which I think is not good, needs to be updated, doesn't match most of the world. Most of the world is not the same way. Just look at China and India, for example, in Asia. Both of those countries are super relationship focused. Most of the world is relationship focused. So that changes negotiations entirely. You're not just focused on that one thing versus one thing, not that one phone versus cash. You're talking about the phone is going to be used by a group of people. And that group of people is connected to a huge group of people. And that huge group of people can promote the seller of that phone. That changes things entirely when you start thinking about that relationship. Again, that idea of what are the interests versus the rights. We're not just focused on getting that phone, which is very expensive, worth this much money. We're talking about the connections and the relationships. So there's many different views that you could consider and you should consider when you're getting into an important negotiation. Should you be checking out the goals? are there incompatible goals? Or the differentiation. I say it's based like this, and the other person says it's based like this. If that differentiation doesn't match, you need to get more information to paint the picture, a bigger picture, so they can still see how it's connected. Again, it comes back to that image, the process of how you paint that image. Next, interdependence. If you say, for example, it's just one thing versus one thing, that is not the same as saying we will have a better relationship going forward. If you sell me one now, I will keep buying one every day for the next 10 years. That interdependence, there's a huge difference. Similar to that whole idea of scarce resources or ambiguous rules or communication problems. There's many things in that process that could slow it down. You need to check what are those details. You need to resolve those details. That whole idea of scarce resources. If you're just saying that one thing versus one thing, again, that's just individual focused. You should try to identify what are the many things involved. Paint that bigger picture that you can control. That ambiguous rules, if somebody doesn't understand how there's a big process with many things involved, if they're just thinking, I want this versus this, those rules are ambiguous. But don't forget, most people in the world are following that old system. They're just looking at one thing for one thing. You need to retrain the rules to the other person so they see the bigger picture and get bigger benefit. That big thing is related to the communication process. Make sure you are painting the picture with the communication process so everybody gets win-win. Everybody gets better advantages. So the idea of the North American idea of relationships, the North American idea of negotiation is usually one thing versus one thing, which is not good usually at all. The individual differences in conflict. There's also details like we could say just this, the reason this deal didn't go through is because the other person's stupid. That's what many experts say when they go to some other group and they couldn't get a good negotiation, they just blame it on the other person being stupid, or they don't have emotional intelligence. Check carefully. Maybe it's you that doesn't see that bigger picture. The personal goals and priorities. Is that thing a big priority? Maybe your boss told you to get it because it's just one step on many different steps, and at the top of the building is a much more important deal that you could get if you're not looking for that one thing. Maybe if you see those other things involved, maybe all these other things are worth more value. So start understanding what is the big picture of the goals and the priorities. And then the conflict orientation. Try to make sure people don't see it as conflict. Try to see it as not just trading one thing for one thing, but there's a big picture here and a bigger picture here. So the other group can get more benefit than just that one-on-one. Make sure that conflict orientation image, that process is painted well. And then the idea of conflict handling. There's forcing people to do things, avoiding people, obviously not good. Problem solving obviously is good versus, again, yielding. These things, yielding, avoiding, forcing, they're not good. You should be trying to solve problems, not just this versus this, but many things versus many things, how it can combine collectively to solve problems. So what is problem solving? We've talked about the best cases for it. The idea of interests are not perfectly opposing. Parties have trust and openness. Issues are complex. A problem with problem solving is the other party takes advantage of the information. If you're providing more information to the other person to show that bigger picture, sometimes the other person is going to use this information to their advantage and still just focus on that one thing and then walk away from the deal. So be careful with that. That forcing, that idea of just pushing somebody. You can push people if you have power. What is the power? Again, you can have the money, you can have exclusivity, you can have the popularity power, you can have the actual legal power with your relationships in society. You can't, like a king versus a police officer versus a CEO, a director, a manager, a low-level staff. All of that is that the environmental power, or you can have that last level of power, which is I said popularity. Oh, specialization power. If you are a specialist in something and the other people don't have that specialist, then you have that exclusive power, that better ability to negotiate than the other. So always keep trying to develop your specialty with no matter what you are doing. Take your classwork and make it into something that impacts your life, especially in East Asia. The other sides, the avoiding bad, yielding bad. So there's good news and bad news about everything. The avoiding is good when conflict is emotionally charged. If some people are starting to yell and scream, then yes, you need to avoid it. Perhaps it's better to say, just take a pause, take a rest break, take a coffee break, and come back to it later when the emotions are lower. Conflict resolution cost is higher than the benefits. That's another problem. Another problem related to that is it doesn't resolve conflict. It just results in frustration if you're avoiding details. Yielding. So when you want something, but the other person wants something, and they're being so difficult, you just yield and let them have their way. That yielding, it's best when the other party has much more power. That's when you need to show you have these other types of power. It's also yielding is good when it's much less important to you than to the other person. The value logic of your position is imperfect. If you are thinking, I need it because of this reason, but if your reason's wrong, that's going to be an issue. A problem with yielding is it increases the other person's expectations, the imperfect solutions. They may think they can get more the same way going forward. So overall, that win-win, conflict handling contingencies. Compromising is best when the parties have equal power. The solution is quick. The parties lack trust. A problem with compromising is its suboptimal solution where mutual gains are possible. If we go on, there's lots more research. Here's more research, another article talking about this. I'm going to get to a couple of other things. Like we're talking about the process, framing that process so that the image and the connections are better understood than just that small individual detailed negotiation. Checking beyond the deal is another big thing. So negotiation fundamentals, the idea of sometimes it's good to set limits, but again, the limits, it's all part of a painted picture. You set those limits sometimes. Those limits could be flexible. You get somebody flying into a company or a country to negotiate a big deal. They may say their plane ticket is the limit. They have to finish before they go back. So understand, setting limits sometimes helps. It pushes people that have a harder limit than the people that don't have those limits. There are resistance points. Also assessing power. As we said, the idea of power, specialization power, financial power, environment, society power, all of those things, popularity power, can impact the negotiations and your skills of negotiation. The more you understand this, the better your negotiation skills will be. This is just an example. Many people think the biggest negotiation in your life is buying a house. Well, actually, I know many people that started poor and they bought a house online in a different country and they're not rich. So it depends on your understanding of the details. That person did a very good job. So some people think there's only a bargaining zone. The seller's resistance, the buyer's resistance, and that's what they usually look at. But if you start seeing more information, if you start broadening that picture, it helps your negotiation abilities quite a lot. So make sure you take a look at how you manage the deal, the information, your skills, the concessions, the strategies. I'm going to show a variety of things here. Last class, we got to this point talking a little bit about managing the process. What are some ways to manage the process? Again, remember that you need to manage the process of how you implement your negotiation and that social capital. Do you have many connections that might help the other person? Do you know the other person's boss, the manager, their family? That social capital is sometimes very important. The relationship building. That first deal is just the beginning of many other deals in a relationship. That can change the outcome of your negotiations a lot. Your reputation. If you have no reputation to start with, like nothing in Facebook, nothing in LinkedIn, the other people, the other party, the company trying to hire you in that negotiation, they're going to see you have very little power. So don't do that. Start developing your power now. Make your LinkedIn, grow your LinkedIn, and not just as a student connected, but try to start clicking on likes and sharing files that promote your specialization. Be careful to remember that image you have for negotiation, especially in East Asia, in Korea, Japan, and China. Your image and the relationship around there is super important. So start finding other specialists and share their stuff and give them a like. It will make you much more attractive when the company is coming to hire you.
I might have like really small tip for negotiation, and it is really specific, but it just came to my mind. Because when like someone is selling, for example, the Instagram account, people were coming to me, but because they usually tried to like change my mind and all of these things, I told them that I'm not the person that is owning the account, but that I have a boss above me, and that the boss, he doesn't really care, and that is why he kind of like wants to sell it. So when he accepts offers, it is just like that he reads it once a week, and if he doesn't accept it, the person cannot make another offer. So for them, it was the only chance, which made them give me much higher bid. So I got to double of what I was supposed to sell it on at first.
Good. Again, practice. The more you can practice doing things like this, the better you're going to be. No matter what the results are now, even if you fail with some negotiations, the more you try, the better you're going to get. So I'm going to wrap up the class and just give you a couple of summary key points of this file. This file, I believe, is more than 80 slides, and there's many other articles I also promote. So I wanted to just introduce again, remind you about the Harvard project. Some parts of it are very good. Some parts are bad. They don't really value international aspects. You must, and I'll explain that later. But one thing that is very good is the idea of BATNA. Make sure you understand not just that one deal item, but what is the best alternative. And there should be many alternatives to your deal. So remember, what is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, and start bringing that into the picture. A problem with the Harvard project is they are saying things like China has this problem or doesn't know how to do this problem. It's better if you understand the value. For example, having many people in the negotiation can be very good. Having drinking and alcohol in a negotiation can be very good and very useful. Having emotion in a negotiation, not being emotional yourself when you lose your ability to think, but having the emotion as a tool could get the other people to respond a certain way. Not just with China, but in other countries, like the American negotiator and the Japanese negotiator. Sometimes just the Japanese idea of staying quiet is very important. Being quiet in a negotiation is incredibly powerful. If somebody says, this is my lowest price, and you say quiet, and then what this says is, oh, and just scratch your head, for example, or raise your eyebrows, many times that other party is going to say, okay, maybe I can give you a bit more of a difference, only because you were silent, using silence as a tool. Next, I wanted to talk about money. The idea of money is quite important. It actually says, again, that when a group of negotiators, when two different negotiators are together, sometimes you don't know each other than just that environment, that picture. If one person in that picture thinks they are richer than the other, usually that person becomes greedier and more demanding in the negotiation than the others.
Excuse me, Professor. So I think can we wrap up our class now, because some students need to go for another class.
Can I finish this in 30 seconds? If the students want to go, you can go anytime, but I'm going to finish this so we can finish the class and the recording, and then we're finished. So other than the idea of that wealth image changes your negotiation abilities as brought by the University of Berkeley, that's important. The rest that I was talking about is the whole idea of culture. For example, there's the deal focused versus the relationship focused. A lot of countries are individual detail focused, like Hofstede talks about. But if you go beyond that and identify most of the world is not individual focused, most of the world is relationship focused, that idea of relationship impacts a lot. And so this PPT goes through and it shows you many aspects of deal focused behavior versus relationship focused behavior and how it impacts and helps negotiation. And then there's different fun examples of these cultural differences. And then after we talk about a lot about China and that, we start getting into other areas. Again, Japan is here. The idea of the US is one area. This is talking about American negotiators, Japanese negotiators, Chinese negotiators, and then there's several different country negotiators is discussed throughout this. So please take a look at how international negotiations can change depending on the picture, depending on the view, and depending on the culture. What is people's values for that negotiation? With that said, thank you very much. If there are any questions, feel free to let me know at any time.